Thank you so much, Jake, and good morning, all. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your patience. I know we began a few minutes late. I want to provide an update to the state and the public on my ongoing efforts to deliver resources for construction of national defense and military quality of life facilities and infrastructure at military bases across the state of Georgia. First thing to understand is that this Congress, I joined the U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee. And it has been more than 3 decades since Georgia has had a United States Senator who sits on the Appropriations Committee, which allocates funding across the federal government. In addition to joining the Appropriations Committee, I am the ranking member leading the Military Construction Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee. And I've taken the lead on the Military Construction Subcommittee because Georgia is a military state. We have some of the most important defense installations in the country and a long tradition of contributing our resources and, of course, our amazing people to national defense and hosting some of the most important units and missions in the armed forces. And what I'm pleased to announce is that we have now passed through the Senate Appropriations Committee a military construction funding bill that, if it is enacted by the whole Congress, will deliver more resources for military construction in Georgia than any time since 2010. This will be the most significant investment in Georgia military construction in more than 15 years, with significant and long overdue upgrades to facilities that are crucial for quality of life for service members and military families, as well as to support the units and the missions vital to our national defense who are working at installations across the state of Georgia. Now, we still have a ways to go, and we're not over the finish line yet. We have to get this bill to the floor of the United States Senate. We need to make sure we have bipartisan support for this bill on the floor of the Senate and that it's not derailed by partisan politics. We then have to negotiate with the United States House of Representatives and pass legislation through the United States House of Representatives. But this is a major milestone, having shepherded this bill through the Senate Appropriations Committee. Again, the first time Georgia has had a senator on the Appropriations Committee in more than 30 years. I'm the ranking member leading the Military Construction Subcommittee, and the bill that we just passed through the Senate Appropriations Committee will deliver more funding for military construction in Georgia than any time in the last 15 years, which is important for military quality of life and important for our national defense. I have asked my team to share with all of you a sample of some of the most significant investments that will be made at installations across the state of Georgia should we successfully enact this bill into law. My highest priority right now is bringing Republicans and Democrats together in order to pass this legislation. I am working to try to get it to the floor of the United States Senate as soon as next week. We will see if we have the necessary bipartisan support to do that, but I have great working relationships with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I want to get this to the floor of the Senate as soon as possible. So one more time, just to make sure everybody understands this announcement, this is an important update on my efforts to deliver military construction resources to defense installations across the state in my position as the ranking member leading the Military Construction Subcommittee. And the draft bill that we've now passed through the Senate Appropriations Committee, a major milestone, would deliver more military construction funding to the state of Georgia than any time in the last 15 years. And with that, I'm happy to take questions from members of the press.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. And again, thank you all for joining us this morning. Again, if you have a question for the senator, please feel free to use the raise hand function. You can also pop into the chat that you'd like to ask a question, and we will call on you from there. But first, going to go over to Chuck Williams in Columbus. Chuck?
Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Senator, how are you? Thanks, Jake. Real quick, obviously, any military capital expenditure funding, construction funding would be important because of Fort Benning and its proximity to Columbus. I understand there may be an elementary school at Fort Benning on this. What are the Fort Benning projects, and what do you think the likelihood of keeping those projects in the budget is?
Yeah, my highest priority for Fort Benning is to help deliver a new world-class elementary school for the children of military families on post at Fort Benning, because the school that kids are in now is just not up to the standard. Now, Chuck, this is a big ticket item. I have written in to the bill that we just passed through the Appropriations Committee about $130 million to support the construction of that new elementary school for military families at Fort Benning. I just want to reiterate, we've gotten it through the Senate Appropriations Committee with bipartisan support, almost unanimous support, Republicans and Democrats. That's a major achievement in such a divided and polarized political environment. But we still have to get this bill to the Senate floor. I'm working to try to get that done as soon as next week, and then we'll still have to negotiate with the United States House. So we are not over the line yet, but the legislation as adopted by the committee includes $130 million, a very significant investment in this new elementary school for Fort Benning families.
Can I have one follow-up, Senator?
Sure.
The 130 million, currently there, I think 4 or 5 elementary schools. There's one middle school on post. Would this be an effort to consolidate into one super elementary, or would you continue to have multiple elementary schools on post?
It will have substantial additional capacity. I will have my team on the military construction subcommittee consult with the Department of Defense and get you precise information about what the next 5 to 10 years would look like for military families, where else students might go once this new school is built. But again, the bill we just adopted in the Appropriations Committee has about $130 million for this purpose. As you know, Chuck, this has been a top priority for the community for a long time. We are now making potentially historic progress toward getting it done. Again, we've still got to get this bill to the floor and through the floor and negotiate with the House.
Thank you, sir.
Perfect. Thank you, Chuck, as always. Next, we'll go over to Connor in Macon. Connor, over to you.
Hey, good morning, Senator. I was
Hey.
wondering if you could talk about the potential new control tower at Robbins, just why that's needed, and what that'll look like. Why is that needed?
Yeah, it is urgently needed. And like Dexter Elementary School at Fort Benning, it's an expensive project. The bill that we passed through the committee, I wrote into that bill about $28 million to support the construction of the new control tower at Robbins. And I'm putting my full weight behind getting that done. Robbins is one of the most dynamic and important installations that the U.S. Air Force uses. They need a world-class control tower, and doing everything in my power to bring Republicans and Democrats together to allocate those funds.
I have a quick follow-up, Jake.
Sure.
Have you heard from any base leaders about any potential problems with the old tower and why they would need a new one?
Well, look, there are a number of new missions coming into Robbins. You've got the J-STARS platform leaving, 4 new missions coming in, and Robbins needs world-class infrastructure, including for air traffic control. It's time for Robbins to have a new state-of-the-art control tower. That's been a clearly identified need for several years now, and that's why I made it a priority in this legislation.
Perfect. Thank you, Connor. We'll go over now. I believe Meredith had a question from Augusta. Meredith?
Hi, yes. Quick question about specifically Fort Gordon. Is there anything you can talk to about any particular allocation for money there or any funding?
Meredith, thank you. And look, the good news for Fort Gordon is that over the last several years, Senator Warnock and I have worked together to deliver such substantial resources for the U.S. Army cyber mission on post and for NSA Georgia that Fort Gordon has some of the most state-of-the-art facilities to execute those missions of any installation in the country. There will be funds in this bill to support minor construction projects as well as planning and design of new facilities at Fort Gordon. My highest priority for Fort Gordon right now is, as we consider the defense authorization, the National Defense Authorization Act, to strengthen the provisions that will continue to put pressure on Balfour Beatty to live up to its obligations to military families in privatized housing on post. Fort Gordon's highest need right now is not the construction of new facilities for the execution of its missions. Fort Gordon's highest priority right now is continuing some of the progress that we've made to get the housing, which is operated by a private contractor, up to standard. And that's my focus on Fort Gordon, but much of that will be fought on the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a separate measure from this appropriations bill.
Got it. So just to be clear, this is not so much having to do with housing and oversight of Balfour Beatty as it is construction of mission critical facilities.
Yeah, this legislation is for the construction of new facilities. And this legislation does not directly fund the construction or renovation of that kind of privatized housing where we've had so many difficulties at Fort Gordon. So the place to tackle that is going to be through the National Defense Authorization Act.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Let me add just one point, Meredith, because when we consider the defense authorization, that's where we're going to try to strengthen, for example, tenant advocacy for military families on post. That's where we're going to try to close the revolving door where you got folks going back and forth between a civilian role at the Department of Defense and then one of these housing contractors, and the potential conflicts of interest that creates. But we did add to this legislation $10 million to strengthen oversight of privatized housing operations across the country. That's a major win for Fort Gordon in this bill.
Okay, so let me just make sure again that I understand. The defense authorization will cover some of the oversight and some of the housing complications that aren't just happening at Fort Gordon, they're happening really at every military installation. But this also includes 10 million for oversight. So this might be I guess you could say a two-pronged approach to continue putting the pressure on places like Balfour Beatty.
The defense authorization is still being worked on. My goal is to include in the defense authorization those provisions to support military families and strengthen oversight of those housing contractors. This bill does include $10 million to support ongoing oversight efforts aimed at privatized military housing.
Understood. So it will be in both, hopefully more so in the defense authorization part of it.
That's correct.
All right, thanks. Got it.